How many of you have seen our screen before? All right, so this particular object is part of our permanent collection and was the inspiration for the focus gallery that we have. We had a really large exhibition in our last cycle, and we had to deinstall some of our permanent collection. So it was exciting to be able to pull things back together again in a new orientation as we deinstalled that and bring this amazing object front and center for people to enjoy. As I mentioned, we had this wonderful exhibition with Clarice in 2014. It was called Clarice Smith, Power and Grace. And we focused on her equestrian subject matter. She really did a wide variety of subjects before starting to paint horses. She did landscapes, she did people portraits, and florals were another strong interest to her. So she was adding equestrian subjects into her already broad variety of paintings that she was creating. She and her husband, Robert H. Smith, purchased a property out this way called Heronwood in 1983. And he started a thoroughbred breeding program. And it was through that change in their lifestyle that Clarice became more able to observe horses. She loved them her entire life, but to be able to look at them as an artistic subject matter, they were right in her backyard. They're starting to go to sales, and they're going to different horse races in Europe, here, and in the United States. There's a really great funny story relating to this. Clarice was, she's one of those larger than life people, but she actually was kind of short. She was about 5 feet tall, I would say, but she could fill a room with her personality. And she told this great story about how when they moved to Heronwood, she and her husband decided that it would be a great opportunity to learn to ride. And so they started taking riding lessons, and Robert took to it immediately. She was always a little bit uncomfortable being that high off the ground. Even after a year, she was a little sort of, not feeling very comfortable in the saddle, as it were. And she started developing a health issue that escalated to the point where she was in the hospital getting testing done to try and figure out what was wrong. It turned out that she was actually allergic to horses. And as she said, it was the happiest day of her life because it meant that she could enjoy them with 2 feet firmly on the ground moving forward. So from 1983 onward through her passing away 2 years ago, she included horse imagery in the types of paintings that she did. And she and her husband split, and she continued to, after he passed away, they split time between Heronwood and Crystal City, where he had actually developed Crystal City. So they have a really magical background in terms of their success as a couple as well. Hugely philanthropic in our community. Just amazing icons of our organization. Mr. Smith was a board member here from 1998 to 2001. And also the foundation has continued to support our Clarice and Robert H. Smith education position here. You met Julie Banner. She is our, has the wonderful title of that to carry that name to the present. So we had the ability at this point to look at really a fun pop-up that would further inform this beautiful screen that we have. And her son, David Bruce Smith, who was here chatting with us yesterday, he was so generous in lending 3 of the paintings that are on view here. So these 2 and the vertical over here. We also were able to garner a loan from the Smithsonian American Art Museum called Big Race, which is the painting here. Such an exciting opportunity. And Clarice really wasn't very fussy about her titles. I love the fact that this painting is called Big Race, and it's just basically painting a race, right? So looking at that as the inspiration for the title for the Focus Gallery, Big Race, the Contemporary Vision of Clarice Smith. It was a great opportunity after 10 years of celebrating the decade since her exhibition here about what it was that Clarice added to the conversation of imagery that depicts sporting subjects. And as a contemporary artist, she was really consciously fusing styles, really in a form looking at the idea of skewing perspective. She really had such a strong love of the horse and the power and dynamism of these animals is, their locomotion, the way that they express themselves, the way they, what their eyes look like when you looked at them. And so you'll notice in a lot of these paintings, the horses dominate. They're, 2/3, maybe even 3/4 of canvas space. And so even to the point that the human beings are diminished in size a little bit. So if we look at these chronologically, the earliest one in the gallery is the Goncourt, yeah. And so I love this one from 1995 because it's looking at stylistic approaches that she took in her other kinds of paintings. So looking at her floral still lifes, she liked to incorporate textiles. So this wonderful opportunity here with her figurative portraits to add these textile components for texture and contrast to create the backdrop for this very dramatic scene. And just the stylistic fusion here is really impressive. She was a professor at GW. She taught for 7 years. She had a master's degree in fine art, and was a really amazing and competent, capable, and ferociously talented as a painter, and very much involved in the community in Washington, D.C. and the artistic world. And so looking at others here, I mentioned the screen. We have this amazing three-dimensional object, which has another really funny story to give you a little bit more of a sense of Clarice as a person. When we were organizing her show, and she had offered this particular object that was in her private collection for loan, we were obviously really excited about it. It's the only one that is a racing scene that she did as a screen.
You didn't give it back.
She actually donated it to us after
sure.
the show. Yeah, we did. We always joke that like if it's gone, there are a couple of us on staff, it's going to be in our house.
I'm taking notes.
You won't tell.
So we have a 19th century sporting screen in our permanent collection, and in the 18th and 19th century, these objects were created as room dividers, so much larger than this particular screen. So I was trying to be all fancy. She always loved talking about her art and her inspirations and her classically trained background, and so I kind of proffered the question of, did you make this screen smaller so that it could be seen in the context of an art object on a pedestal? And she looked me straight in the face and she busted up laughing and she said, no dear, I did it to cover up my television. So that gives you kind of a sense of, very practical, but amazing in terms of her ability to communicate an emotion of a moment. Really taking advantage of these panels to create even more three-dimensional aspects to this. And she really loved the idea of the silhouette and form as sort of the basic sort of hierarchy of where she's starting and where she's going in her compositions. She liked to look at black and white race horse imagery and cut out silhouettes that she liked. So if there was a pairing of a jockey and a horse that looked good to her, she'd kind of clip it out. And she said herself that she liked to arrange them like paper dolls. And I always remembered her saying that in particular. When I had conveyed this to David, her son, he said something that almost made me cry. She used to play with paper dolls when she was a little girl. So really, really great connection there. But from an artistic perspective, it allowed her to focus on the shape of the grouping without any subconscious implications of color and palette. So she was able to look at the form, create the motion of the scene, and then introduce her ideas about color and palette into the composition. And so starting to envision this idea here. And as I mentioned, she really the horse has primacy. It's always going to be sort of the front and center. We also selected paintings for this focus gallery that were different studies of motion. She did a really wide variety of imagery, really pastoral scenes of their paddocks. There's a really striking, almost life-size portrait of Robert on a horse that she did. So the catalog that you have in your hand, which I'm happy to give as a gift today for those who joined Coffee with the Curator, has the full exhibition in it with illustrations of everything that was in there. And so I really love the idea of saying, what is it that Clarice's voice brings to the discussion of equestrian imagery? And this grouping here really calls out sort of the most dramatic aspects of it. So in terms of the screen, she had the opportunity to, Bill Adair and Katie Jackson, who are an artist, and he has Goldleaf Studios in Washington, D.C. They're good friends. And so she had this opportunity to learn about gold leaf and metal leaf. And she really talked about enjoying using this medium in this way, in particular for this project, because I mean, it speaks for itself. It really has this amazing luminescent, you just get this incredible intensity and energy of the moment, these foreshortened perspective with these jockeys and horses racing right at you. And she talked about the idea of how she primed the surface with the glue and then breaking these different types of composites up. Gold leaf will very easily ride the currents of air, where some of the other leaves can be actually placed and moved around a little bit more. So in a lot of ways, this is a combination of happy accidents and purposefully placing them, and the happy accidents hoping for the best, they go where you want them to go.
So all the sand in the front is gold leaf, is that right?
Yeah, so metal leaf. There are different types of composite and gold leaf on the bottom.
Cool.
And this is one of those that lighting is everything. To be able to have the reflectivity to really get that sort of the power of what it's capable of is really also based on lighting. And we really, I wanted to have the gold sort of feature be a more prominent thing with the wall. For those of you who are interested, we get a lot of questions about the paint colors we use for every exhibition that we do. This is a really tough color. It took 10 coats to get it to actually get to be consistent, because the metal pigments have a tendency to spread to the outer corners of the sponge. So it was a bear, but everybody stuck with it, and really great sort of backdrop for it. She, in particular, when we talked about what color her gallery should be for her show, she had wanted a bright white. So the two focus walls that are in here are the color that we had in 2014, just as a celebration of what her preferences were. I like to think that she would have liked this because it's an accent and it's not the entire thing, and it really draws attention to the gold leaf in the composition. And so yes, I mentioned after the exhibition, it was an incredible honor that she saw us as a steward for this object to bring it to the permanent collection. And it remains a rock star. I mean, people remember it and come back to see it over and over again. We have a couple of things in the gift shop, even that just plugging it there. There's some notebooks, some other things in the gift shop with it on there.
And it's a perfect bookmark.
There you go. There's a perfect
size.
Yeah. So we have the one of the panels is a vertical cutout for bookmark too. Absolutely. So she went, in this particular instance, the bird, Sienna was the first real formal exploration of using this sort of backlit idea with the jockeys sort of in shadow and having it sort of be the drama of the orange and the gold leaf. It inspired her to paint Leading the Gate 2011 with this sort of a variation on the theme. She also did two others, smaller works that are a pair of horses galloping sort of in this backlit forest, which are incredibly dramatic as well. Dead Heat, the painting kind of speaks for itself. It's just so powerful, So this is from 1999, so this is going to be before she did the screen. She also chose this painting to have her photograph for the exhibition catalog in 2014, which is reproduced on the didactics in the corner there. And one of the things I don't know, maybe she thought I was uncomfortably staring at her eyes, because she did perfect makeup. Like, she could flick that wing like nobody could. Like, literally, it was like, she just her hair was always so beautifully done, and she was just such a beautiful human being, and she really spent, just everything was perfection with her. So it was a really fun photo shoot that we did that day. She came in and said yellow is my favorite color, so I put on my favorite yellow shirt, and it was just, again, she had this idea of the limited palette exploration, right? Where you're purposely confining yourself to this mauve blue contrast, where this could completely fall apart and get really muddy quickly, and to find sort of the subtleties of those variations to create this kind of drama is really impressive. And on this vertical scale as well, to intensify the drama. You can see how this idea starts to percolate to how a panel where you're taking this vignette and reproducing it as a race from there. I also like looking at the contrast of how far do you get with paint and pigment and creating that emotion and energy of the kicking up dirt, versus the kind of, if you think about how do you get there with gloppy impasto, how do you convey what she was able to do with gold leaf so much more effectively in terms of the drama of it, is really, you can see where gold leaf ends up being a great medium to kind of exaggerate this perspective into another way.
Claudia, did she work from photographs?
She worked from composite ideas from the photographs that she observed. So she would definitely, and she worked directly onto canvas. Like she sort of skipped over the sort of study process after a while, where she literally freed herself up to just kind of put this blank thing in front of her and just kind of start keying it in and working through the composition. I just love the intensity of the gaze of these horses. You really get a sense of personality and drama in this particular painting.
Can I add something about Clarice Smith?
Of course.
For those of you who might be in the Maryland or DC area, she and her husband donated a lot of money for the Clarice Smith Art Center in College Park. And it's been in existence maybe 20 years. They have and they feature a lot of the students there, but they bring in wonderful artists. And if you have a chance, it's a wonderful place to go. And the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra has that as another one of its homes in the effort to reach out to more of the community. So
they have multiple venues, so size auditoriums. So they have dance and opera, and obviously the symphony and voice. So it's a wonderful place you might want to explore. It's easy to get to right off the Beltway.
Yeah.
Good parking.
Yes.
And probably not too far from Glenstone.
Glenstone's in.
Glenstone's in Trevelyan.
No,
Is that far?
Glenstone's quite a ways away.
Is it?
Glenstone's here and Zoom.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
When it's up there, it kind of all blends into me. Thank you.
So yeah, and it's called the Clarice for short, which I just think is such a fitting thing, right? And when we first met, not surprisingly, they were Mr. and Mrs. Smith to most people. And I really am honored to have had that sort of transition and getting to know her, to be able to call her Clarice. And I really, to me, there's an extra layer to that, because we were talking about in the catalog how it's going to get confusing, and that we're going to have to do Mr. and Mrs. Smith over and over again, and Clarice, because we're the story that we were telling is this is their personal life. This is how this evolved into this amazing collection of paintings that you see, because they were personal observations through their life and their love for one another. And so, I don't, as someone who is profoundly interested in making sure that as art historically, that we're not, calling out the female artists with the misses. I usually do not write formal pieces about female artists with a salutation. And so then we got Smith and Smith, right? So now it's getting really confusing. So, I'd ask her, what would you like to do? And she invited the intimacy of Clarice instead of Smith. And so that was kind of one of those, it's a tipping point. I am very old school. I was brought up to the idea that, it's an honor to be invited to have the ability to speak to someone with using their first name. So from from her artistic perspective, it also inviting that intimacy in posterity for her in the catalog as well. And I had asked her at one point when we were doing this project, because, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they've got a pretty big reputation. It's in Crystal City, the amazing philanthropic projects that they supported throughout our communities that are celebrated so dearly. And I asked her, what do you want to be remembered for? And she said, I want to be remembered as an artist. And I think that that's a really critical thing, that, I have the amazing ability here as a hub and a communicator of sporting history and heritage to be able to stand in front of you right now and say that that's what she wanted to be remembered for. And that's a powerful, powerful thing. And when you think about the idea she painted for almost 40 years, she had a huge, huge voice in terms of the output of artwork that she created. And having the opportunity to have a loan from the Smithsonian American Art Museum, it's such a great feather in our cap to have the painting here in the first place, and we're really proud of being able to have that connection to DC. And she is a DC-based artist. We struggle sometimes to get people from DC out this way. So thank you very much for making the trip, because I know it can be very daunting sometimes. So we're really excited to have the connection to the city. And looking at, this, it's behind, I've gotten the question a couple times if this is pastel, if it's behind, because it's behind glass. It's not, it's a requirement of the American Art Museum when it travels to be behind glass, so it was part of the installation here. So really dramatic thing, it's 2001, and I really picked paintings to show the variety of ways that she approached the idea of horses in motion. So sidelong views, this, really bold, foreshortened perspective and looking at those kinds of ideas. Any thoughts on that?
You did very well by her. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, that's very sweet. Thank you. It was an honor to know her. She was an amazing human being. I remember when she came and did 2 gallery talks, and she was had been having issues with her knee, and she had to use a cane. And she was really upset about that because she was incredibly active. She golfed. She was just, she's very vibrant. And I mentioned she's short in stature. We had, just like last night, she was a people gatherer, and we had it's almost 100 people in Gallery 1 where we had the beginning of the show. And I mean, everyone was just in rapt attention and awe of her because she was just such an amazing force and such a great communicator of the things that she loved and very authentic. It's been a really fun opportunity to be able to share those experiences about her again. We're very, very honored that her son chose to lend the paintings as well, so we were able to bring this gallery together for everybody to enjoy. Yes, ma'am?
You mentioned that she also earlier in her career painted flowers.
She's always
Oh, and what else did you say?
people,
People.
landscapes. And this is another thing about Clarice. She never rested on her laurels. She continued to innovate and create and stretch and move in different directions until the very last days. She was very excited when we were creating the checklist for the 2014 exhibition because she'd just come back from a trip to New Mexico. And she was so blown away by the skies that she started doing abstract painting. It literally took her in a completely sort of different direction. And so she really started doing that as well. And it's not like she ever left any one thing behind, it was additive. So she did florals, she did people, she did whatever. She usually had 3 or 4 paintings going at a time. She had a studio here and one in Crystal City. And she kind of bounced back and forth between the compositions until she was finished. After that, she collaborated with the Smith Paley exhibition was at the National Museum of Women Artists. If you saw that particular project, that was an oversized screen where she did the oil panels for it. And Paley is an iron worker, a sculptor who worked in iron, who created the frame for this. So have a peek at that online to take a look at that. And then she started working in stained glass. So she just kind of kept going.